can do it if I just believe it. There's nothing to it.
When you think about it, our entire life is a classroom. If you're like me, you can remember your parents teaching you the different parts of your face, and they point to your nose and you said nose, and they point to your eye, you say eye, and they point to your ear, you'd say, well, that's ear. And they were teaching you something. It was my parents that taught me the importance of discipline. They taught me that I had to clean my room up when I first, I'm not sure I always did it, but they tried to teach that. And they taught me how to cut the yarn, and they taught me how to have a job, because at the age of 11 or 12 I had a paper route. And I learned responsibility, because I had some people that depended on me to cut their yard, or they depended on me to shovel their snow. And so our parents are our first teachers. But then after our parents, there is an African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. And I can remember a Mr. Charlie who lived about a street down from me, and I was only 4 years old, but because I lived in a real neighborhood, I knew all the neighbors' names. Right next to me was the artists, and on the other side of me was Mr. and Mrs. Miller, and across the street from me was Mr. and Mrs. Hearns, and down the street was Mrs. Sprang and Hazel Lewis. And I remember, and I said Hazel, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have called her by her first name, because we didn't do that, Mrs. Lewis. But I can remember that the whole village, each one of them had something to teach me. And so Mr. Charlie, before I started going to school, I can remember walking through the alley into his backyard, and he was always sitting on his back porch. And I guess you call it chucking beanstalks. I don't know what he was doing, but he was doing something with beans, and he would cut them and split them, and he'd put them into water. And while he was doing that, he would talk to me, and he would tell me things about my life. I can remember him telling me, as I was getting ready to go into kindergarten, that I was going to catch up with the boy that lived right next to me. I can remember him telling me how smart I was. I can remember him putting seeds of confidence into me. You see, my entire life has been a classroom. But what I want to talk to you today about is your classroom. Now, for a living, I am a professor in the business programs department of a local college. And so I believe in formal education. But today I want to talk to you about some things that I've learned that maybe we could learn outside of the classroom. We're going to start a 12-part series. About a year ago, I wrote a letter to my sons, and it was 12 things that I wanted them to learn. And so we're going to go through this series, and I want to talk to you about these 12 things. And hopefully some of them will help you. The first thing I want to talk about today is define yourself. The first life lesson that I've learned, and I didn't learn it in school, I learned it through experience. If you look at the definition of learning or to learn means that you have changed something permanently as a result of an experience. You either know something now, you either have understood something differently, but you have learned something because of an experience. You see, what school does is it gives us tools to learn, but when we really learn is we learn in life. And so one of the things that I've learned that I want to share with you now is you must define yourself. How did I learn that? Well, I can remember in the 12th grade going to the high school counselor, and it was the custom at that time when you were in the 12th grade, before you went to college or before you went to get a job or before you went to the military, before you graduated, you had to go to the high school counselor, and the high school counselor would sit down with you and try to plot out your future. Now, to be honest with you, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew the game. I knew that whenever an adult asked you what you wanted to do, you had to have an answer. And the most intelligent answer always seemed to be, I want to go to school. And so I sat down in front of the counselor's office and in front of the counselor's desk, and he asked me, well, young man, what do you want to do? My answer was what it should have been. I want to go to college. Well, the counselor looked at me. He pulled out my records. He looked at my records and he looked back at me. He said, "Oh, young man, that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to learn a trade. You want to get a job. College might not be for you." Self-efficacy is defined as the degree to which you believe you are capable of performing a task. And because I didn't know anybody personally in my immediate circle that had ever gone to college, I didn't know anybody in my immediate circle who was currently attending college. As a matter of fact, when I was in the 12th grade, I did not know what a credit hour was. And so when this counselor, this person in authority told me that I shouldn't go to school, I took his word for it. 2 months after graduating from high school, I was working in a factory. I remember to this day reporting at 6 o'clock in the morning to this factory. And my job, it was a factory that created refrigerators. We built refrigerators, and I worked on what was called Line 1. And all day long, refrigerators would come down an assembly line, and people at different stations in the assembly line would put different things on the refrigerator as it laid flat coming down the assembly line. Sometimes people would put shelving in, put the lights in, put the fiberglass in, put the plastic casing in. And when the refrigerator got to my station, my job for 8 hours was to lift and turn the refrigerator for 8 hours. Well, after the first day, I could barely walk to my car. And so I made it to the cafeteria. I put my head on the cafeteria desk, one of the tables, and I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I had declared in my mind, I had determined that I was going to go to college. The next month I enrolled into Ohio State University, and I discovered this stuff's not that hard. I can do this. But more importantly, I learned something. I learned that you can never let anybody define you, because they will always define you too small. When people define you, they're defining you by what you've done. But how many of you know that you haven't done your best yet? As a matter of fact, you haven't, if you look at your high school history, if you look at even your college history, if you've never gone to school, if you look at your adolescent history, you haven't done your best yet. But when somebody looks at you, they've looked at what you've done. They can't see what you can do. And so they've looked at what you've done, and they try to project what you were able to do, but they can't see your intelligence. They can't see your drive. They can't see your integrity. They can't see your desires. They can't see your wants. All they can see is your past. My friend, never let anybody define you, because they will always define you too small. I saw something on Facebook, and I'll quote a lot of Facebook things as we go through this 12-step process that we're going to look at. The saying said something like, you are writing your life story. Don't let anybody else hold the pen. People will always have opinions of you. Some of their opinions will be good. Some of their opinions will be not so good. Some people will claim that you can't do what you want to do. But never let anybody else tell you that you can't go where they've never been. Never let anybody else tell you that the sky is the limit when there are footprints on the moon. Never let anybody define you. My friend, the first lesson that I just want to leave with you today is define yourself. That's step one.
If I just believe it, there's nothing to it. I believe I can fly. I believe